Hi everyone, it's Julia Keller, juliakeller.co.uk. So if you've been following a lot of these that I've been doing over the past time, you know that my obsession is healthy aging. That's why this whole thing is called All About Healthy Aging. But that recently I've started to bring in lots of different areas of healthy aging so that you guys get more than just, what should I eat in order to age well? And how do I take care of my microbiome in order that I age well? And how do I exercise and sleep properly and manage my stress? Much more towards a mental health aspect and kind of a bigger picture. So one of the things that has been seen in a lot of research is that people who have better networks, people who have people around them, age better. And fare better, live better, stay healthier longer, are healthier in general over the course of their lives, more so than people who don't have it. Now, this is obviously taking, we kind of take the focus away from just the diet. So diet makes a really big difference. I'm not going to lie to you. It's really important. How you treat your body makes a huge difference. But your mental health, your mental state, and that has to do with your network. Do you have family? Do you have friendships? Do you share your house with somebody or do you live alone? Even things like having a pet, makes a big difference in your mental health and how you feel overall, because it's about connecting with people, and connecting with people brings us better feelings inside. So obviously, if you know a little bit about science, you know about the feeling, the happy hormone, oxytocin and serotonin, and these things that make us feel good inside. And a lot of those things come from our relationships with other people. So I'm incredibly just thrilled to have two amazing people that started something that really, I could even only imagine, but couldn't even think of myself, and one of them I know started something else that I was incredibly blessed to be part of. Really, really chuffed to have these two on today because they started something very, very special and unique. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves because that's what I like to do with people, and to tell you a little bit more about something about how helping people to connect people with other people, and not only just to connect them, but helping them to understand how to better connect through conversation. So I'm going to put it over to Rafe, who is one of the partners. Do tell us more about this venture.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I love what you're doing, Julia, and really excited to be even a small part of it. Our piece started about 8 years ago when I was putting on a gig. I'm a promoter and put on events, and Harry was the performer. And he was using his voice in really special ways, and we were all kind of blown away. It was the first time, I think one of the first times he had done it unplugged, because we were in a living room in a secret gig. And afterwards, he and I started to talk much more expansively about the human voice and how we can all have a voice. And to your point, how conversation can really bring us together and make the world a better place. But we realized while we were talking it through is we didn't have a clue really or I certainly didn't, what was a good conversation, how you measure it, how you understand it. And we have no tools as a species for the most fundamental thing that we do. We don't learn how to talk and how to have a good conversation and know what good is. So over 8 years, just as friends and people connected through music, we thought and chatted about it over chess and other things. And when the lockdown hit, and it was all so apparent that we had very few ways to connect with each other, we started bringing people together over Zoom and having deep conversations with strangers, just as a way to understand. It was really
something I would do.
Well, and the whole thing was really life affirming, because we would mash together great people and sit back and with a deep topic and just see what happened. And all of the people we brought together at the time, we're going back to April of 2020, said, wow, I haven't spoken to anybody outside of my dog, my parents, my partner, if I have one. And so that was a journey of bringing people together and learning from those conversations. And alongside that journey, we started a company late last year called This and That. And This and That is simply how to build tools to help people have better conversations, to your point, to stave off loneliness, but also to bring people together who may not normally have a way to speak to each other. And fundamentally to see that, is there a way we can help people along this journey of this complex journey of how to have a good conversation, period. Because we believe when you do, the world is a better place. So I'll pause it there and just hand the baton over to the other bearded fellow on the call and see what he has to say.
Yeah, and before I do any like introductions, just to like Rafe's point, I think in the world today, we have many like roads to walk when it comes to connecting to each other. We have so many devices and systems. And in many ways, we are universally and globally connected. But I feel like these roads don't have many markers, and there's not many sort of like systems out there that can help us navigate those roads. And communication is hard. Conversations are hard. It's even harder to find a good conversation. And I think a lot of pressure is actually put on people to be fluent. Even this dialogue right now is a complex thing. So how do we help people to navigate those dialogues? Is conversation a skill? We believe so. Are we taught how to, as Rafe said? I don't think we are. So with all of this like universality of connection and all of these systems, we really feel there's a space to just help people. And when you do that, there is all kinds of social good that happens. And we think about this idea of what is philanthropy now, this idea of helping and supporting each other. Having a good conversation, moderating, facilitating a good conversation is a good thing. So helping people navigate that, we're really interested in quantifying and finding and exploring the benefits. And it's also a really exciting creative challenge. So bringing together, obviously, thought leaders, world experts, academics, sociologists, anthropologists, artists, musicians to kind of tackle this subject is fun anyway. Just bringing these people together is amazing. But we really feel like we can help a lot of people with this idea, and not enough is being done to facilitate people. And of course, that connects to loneliness. And to your point on networks, I'll mention a little bit later, but a few of the academics we've been working with have some really interesting ideas on like why like networks help people. So yeah, that's just a little kind of bounce off Rafe. And as you mentioned, I came from music, and I work a lot with creatives and technologists, like producing artworks that help people connect with new ideas. But it's all in the spirit of trying to break boundaries and open people's minds.
I love it. I think the idea is brilliant. And you're so right. We don't learn how to be a good conversational buddy. I mean, some people have read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is like way before, it's kind of more our time or before our time. And there, there's a little bit of a clue, but it's not like you learn that in school. I mean, you do there's a little bit of the vetting process where if you're a better conversational buddy, you'll kind of have more friends. And so you learn early on through school, you'll do better if you can be more of that kind of interesting conversationalist, but also good listener. But other than the vetting process in life, there's not really anything that helps us understand how to speak to people properly and even really how to listen. When you guys do your conversational pieces, other than connecting people, do you give people, like, is there lessons of how to be a better conversationalist?
Yeah, so we don't literally do it like we're in school, but we model the way. So we obsess over moderating, and moderating, the trick is a couple of things. First, plan and let people know what the topic is. And that simple thing is very rare in conversation. It happens in a business meeting, but between friends or between casual and informal conversations, it almost never happens. You riff. And we're, as Harry mentioned, we're working with a number of academics, and they have proven through research that actually having an agenda, even for a simple conversation, increases the likelihood it's going to be a good chat. So we're modeling the way by saying to our group of friends or even strangers, here's what we're going to talk about. Secondly, we're experimenting with, and we don't have the answer yet, but we're experimenting with a tool that we created that allows people to see how long they've spoken for.
Wow. Versus how long they've listened.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I love it.
That's exactly right.
Is there a balance? I mean, can you give 3 tips that I can give to the people listening to this, how to be a better conversationalist?
Well, I'll jump in with one and let Harry riff off. Okay. So, well, I've already said one, so I'll give you a couple, and then we can maybe give you more than 3. But okay. I think, first of all, just thinking about what your topic's going to be is massive, and it's incredibly simple, but it's massive. The academics we're working with are at Harvard, and we can share with you some of the papers they put together and how they've gone about it. And they're working very closely with us on adapting our tools. The second one is equity in conversation. So a lot of people are quite...
I make notes.
Oh, great. A lot of people are very quiet. And it doesn't mean that they want to jump in, but sometimes there's a dominant voice who might or may not be the one who has the best things to say. Mm-hmm. So we think having an eye towards a clock, at least at the beginning of a conversation to get it going. Let's say there are 10 people. If everyone speaks for 2 minutes about whatever the beginning icebreaker or conversation is, at least it gives you a feeling of we've all shared something. We don't want to be so prescriptive that we're timing every part of it, because that gets too formulaic. But we do say to people, we would like you to stick to this. And literally by sharing a clock and proving some equity, to your point, Julia, it forces everybody else to listen, and it sends a not subtle message that everyone here is important.
That's a really good idea. But what do you do when you find people who, some people, because we don't get taught how to be a good conversational buddy or a conversational person, some people, like you said, have a lot to say, but not necessarily anything useful. And some people are really good at listening, but are quite, they're the kind of the mouse in the back of the room, but they're very, very good listeners. And so when they do speak up, they've been listening, so they kind of have a good point to add, but they tend to be very tentative. How do you, in real life, let's say, how do you ensure, people learn how to do both? And especially when people are used to hearing the sound of their voice and, sorry.
Yeah, no, all good. But yeah, I think a really interesting idea is that when you think of methodologies in dialogues and conversations, you tend to think of the more formal end of meetings and planning and debate and critical thinking, something that's not accessible, was not seen as accessible to everyone. And the book that you mentioned, a lot of those books are just to decide to read that is a certain sort of percentage of society. A lot of people don't feel that that's something they can get better at. It's not something that they actively even sort of think about or want to think about, because they do talk. Everyone talks. I already do it. Why do I need to improve? So making that accessible is really important. And just with taking some of the simple methodologies that you find like all across the world in the formal aspects of speaking and dialogue and critical thinking, and making that accessible to that huge percentage of people that never normally think about planning, structure, like sort of prompts. There's really interesting creative ways that you can make those things accessible. And we're not just talking about education, it's daily social interactions. So if someone is asked to kind of fill a certain amount of time, there's a few things that happen. The person who, as you mentioned, who talks too much, can sort of see a clock going down. They think about what they're saying. They're watching the clocking other people, and half of speaking is listening. So when you're thinking, if you're talking too much and there's structure that's insinuated, you're thinking about listening and you're thinking actively about how much time you're taking up. If someone doesn't speak enough, there is that kind of, if they have to fill a certain amount of time, or they're shy or they're anxious, of course, when you try to fill that time, it's a challenge. But many good things in life are about overcoming those hills and those challenges. So where that anxiety kicks in, what we see is when people follow a plan, follow a methodology, they end up becoming better at speaking and activating. And what's so interesting is when you have people who keep talking and they fill that time, they end up sharing things or saying things that can be the most valuable thing in the entire session. But without that plan, without that methodology, without that structure, that would have never have been said. So think about all of the genius ideas and all of the emotions and feelings that people have that because of their habits in conversation is left unheard and unseen. So planning and methodology isn't just for the formal parts of dialogue.
I mean, I jump in with stuff that happened on lockdown that a lot of people will recognize. And when we started getting together family Zooms and had 30 cousins from around the world chatting with no agenda or structure, it was a disaster because, you know, the three people who talk the most. Yeah. It got boring quickly. Yeah. You could see everybody nodding off. And by the time we got to an hour, everyone was ready to shut off their Zoom. But then my cousin Joanne said, okay, let's have a topic next time. And so we brainstormed, and the topic was, tell us about your two greatest family memories and tell us something that you learned from, you know, one of the people on the call that, or a family member that was profound. And all of a sudden it became a hour that flew by, that nobody wanted to stop.
It's a goal-oriented conversation. Like nobody's ever thought of that. It's such a clever thought.
Well, yeah. And to your point about aging, you know, we had the youngest person on the call was 18 and the oldest was 101. Wow. And everyone connected immediately because there was a commonality, and this network of people were brought together so closely. And I remember the book you mentioned. The thing that I learned from it, if I have the right book, was it said in conversation, and this was about sales, but in conversations, solve problems and make people feel good. And I think those two things, those simple things, are really incumbent upon all of us, and go back to listening. The final point I'll say is find ways to remind people that really listening is a huge part of the art of conversation.
I think I read a book. I don't remember the title, but it said one of the lines in there was that listening is one of the most underrated skills that we all need to possess, but unfortunately most people don't. And listening isn't just something you do with your ears. Listening is something you do with your eyes, your body, everything. You know, your whole language when you're talking to somebody tells them if you're listening to them or not. Because I mean, I can be listening to you and being like, yeah, good idea. Or I can be listening to me like, wow, great idea. You know, and that sends a completely different message. And I think that's a really important question, because a lot of times we're so wrapped up in ourselves, especially, you know, during certain points of our lives, that we love to hear the sound of our voice, love to hear our own ideas, but miss, you know, that kind of listening is almost something you have to do in a vulnerable, you have to be completely vulnerable and completely yourself to listen properly. So that means you can't be thinking, okay, how do I look in the camera? Or how do I, you know, what am I going to say next that makes me sound smart? You know, it's really like engaging with the other person's words. How do we teach a skill like that to people who are, you know, over 20? Do you know what I mean? Like people who have spent so much time not knowing it. Ooh.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Well, it sounds ridiculous, but talking about it is a good start. And this idea of actually many people are so scared and pressured in dialogues, especially when conversations really matter. There's a lot of things that happen physically. The fight or flight system and the adrenal sort of system can be massively triggered by conversations. I think everyone's had that moment when they're waiting to say something, maybe when you're a bit younger, where you feel that momentum building up. Something's about to happen. I need to communicate something. And the idea of revealing that's not easy, the idea that actually is experienced by everyone. And if you are very strong in conversation, if you're like fluid and have flow state, that doesn't mean that by not helping people, you're the only one that matters. You need to realize that by joining the conversation, helping other people plan, meet you at your skill level with assistance helps you. And if you struggle with dialogue and you have that anxiety and those frustrations, you are assisted. And then if those people are assisted and you're very strong in dialogue, then that just creates this circuit, which is more effective, more empathy, more compassion. So just by acknowledging it and finding creative ways, practical ways of illuminating it of anyone at any age, but specifically younger people and people that are very sort of ambitious, there are other sides of the coin that everyone can learn from. And it's about revealing those two sides to each other. I think that's a really, really important idea.
I'll add that Harry came up with a very simple set of questions where we just ask people, what do you want more of from conversation? What do you want less of? And what can you do better? And when you ask a talkative person those questions, it's inevitable that they say, well, I can be a better listener. And so even that simple construct already starts to educate people who we ask to remember that.
Sounds like it's about making people conscious of, you know, rather than giving them like a, it's not really like a school lesson, like this is how you listen, because it's not really something you can teach. It's more about making people conscious of the fact that they need to be better at listening. And I think inevitably, I would say the majority of people probably are lacking in the listening bit rather than the conversation bit. While at the same time, we have to, you know, there are people who need to learn to carry a conversation. So how do you teach people who are shy to kind of open up more?
Well, just to go back to a point you just made, I don't think it's necessarily just like, I would disagree that maybe there's more people that need to think about listening, because the ones that aren't speaking are silent. This is the thing. We don't know how many people are quiet and are not engaging. And I think there's a far greater proportion of silent people, anxious people, than there are necessarily the kind of overconfident sort of big speakers, because yeah, that's something that is so loud and it's so obvious. But I'm really interested in this idea of new methodologies, as I've mentioned, but just revealing those silent people is a really key key idea. But it's also not just, as you say, about teaching, it's about the experience of dialogue. There's many helps and aids and educations and books about being better at kind of convincing people or connecting with people. But the idea of you can bring people together, you can do better, you can have an incredible, unique experience. There can be more empathy, more compassion with very little effort, but with some smart ideas. And in terms of like direct education, of course, that can be and is a part of this, but I'm really interested in the experience of dialogue and really original, world-class, brand new ways of tackling that, which I bring from the arts and bring from the experiential world. And it doesn't have to be VR and XR and these things. It's just having a unique conversation experience. It's a really exciting and great way to learn.
And there is something amazing that happens when you have a real conversation with somebody. You know, if you kind of can unconsciously get out of yourself and really connect with somebody, because there's something that happens when you have that connection with other people. It's a very unique experience. I mean, it's like eating an amazing chocolate bar, you know, that feeling of like, wow, I feel lifted from within myself because I really get where this person's going, or get this person, or just connect with them in a certain way. What do you think of I have this thought that we can connect with anyone if we let ourselves open up to really understand their experience and to really connect with them. Do you think that's true, or do you think some people are just like so different that they cannot really connect with each other?
I mean, I'm an optimist, and I think that we all have something to share. My mom used to say that everyone is an expert on their own life, and there's also been this
mom.
yeah, and so everybody has something fascinating, and you just have to dig for that gold. And while that doesn't mean they're going to be your best friend and your soulmate, you can have a conversation with everyone once you have that commonality. And to your other point, Yeah, Harry and I agree. There's very few things better than getting into a great conversation with someone where the time melts away and you think of it as, just for me, just being truly alive and just being in that zone, in that state. It's incredible. So how do you create more of that? Well, that's what we are starting with, this and that. That's what we're starting to figure out, how we help people get a little closer to that. We're not going to solve it. It's too massive a thing, but can we bite off pieces of it? And I go back to your point about listening. It did make me think of something I said originally around education. Why is there no class on being a better listener? Why are we learning about math when most of us won't use that math ever again? So I can't, there's some more pragmatic skill sets. Yeah.
Going into schools, it's such a fundamental thing. I look at what my high schoolers are learning. I mean, their school is pretty advanced with teaching a lot of core skills that they need to have, like presentation skills. They have to present in front of a group. But yeah, why not teach people to truly connect from a conversation? Bring that. It's brilliant.
It's a lot more useful than some of the things we learned in school, at least as a compliment. And we know it'll help immediately for as you said, to your high schoolers. It'll help kids in the playground if they're able to listen better. And then it sets them up for, an important life skill.
One of my references is an incredible man called Ken Robinson, who's from the UK. And he tackled the idea of creativity is something that everybody needs and everyone can do. Everyone can be creative. It's not just the arts. It's not just an artist challenge. And he managed to take that idea all the way through up to government. And if there was a national campaign for literacy and numeracy, why not creativity? And what he's doing there, he's revealing that there is actually something in all of us that we can connect to. And by doing that, it improves everything. Every job, every type of expertise, every relationship. Creativity is synonymous with being a person, and you can do that. We feel really strongly that dialogue and communication and better communication is the same thing. People can do better, and to kind of challenge that and help people. Obviously, we're already in some really exciting conversations, but how far can you take the idea of waking up that idea in millions of people, which is have a conversation, think about your dialogues, connect with people, choose what you want to do with that betterment, and we're going to help you do that. That's what we think is really exciting.
I love that. I think it's such a good idea, but bring that everywhere. Teach people from a very young age, but also when they're older. There's no time, like you said, like creativity. I totally agree. There's so many different ways that we can be creative. I used to think I'm not creative at all because I can't draw. But then you uncover so many different ways in which there's so many ways to be creative, just as there are so many ways to connect with people through a brilliant conversation. So I think it's amazing. I'm sure lots of people who are listening to this will think it's amazing and such a great idea. How do people get involved? If they're like, oh, bring me on. I want to be part of this conversation. Because I definitely do. This is such a good idea.
We're super early in our journey, but we do have a website, which we can write in the chat as well. It's just thisandthat.chat. Thisandthat.chat. It's super, super straightforward. And there you can get in touch with us, and the few prompts. We're right now we're setting up conversations every week, some on Clubhouse, some on Zoom. These are all free, and these are all a chance for us to just learn and meet each other. And then over the next, the post-lockdown period, we'll be getting people together in real life. As that grows, we will probably be streaming that for people who don't want to come or can't come to wherever we're doing it, as a way to just explore and learn about all these topics that we've talked about. And we'll be launching an app, which we've already developed, but it's just not ready to go outside of beta. But the app will be very simple, and I should say apps because we'd like to do this over time, but it will be, hopefully it will be something that'll help people have a slightly better conversation because of some of the things we've talked about with you now and some of the things that we're bubbling up and we're developing. we're also doing it all with, as we said, with people who are experts, who are world-class academic experts who can say, well, hey, we've interviewed and talked to tens of thousands of people about this. So we're marrying that with our ability to bring together networks of people who can help teach us what good is and help experiment with these tools.
So I just will add, yeah, if you head over to the website, that's an opportunity to just say hello. At the moment, as Rafe said, we're still developing, but you can send us a very simple email just through that site. And we're just interested in original ideas and people that believe in that mission, that people can talk to each other in new ways, they can connect in new ways. So we're really open, and that's kind of half of the game at the moment, is to find those original thinkers and bring them together. Because this isn't just about us, and this is what I love about this project, is that everybody wins by bringing these people together. And the curation of myself and Rafe and the ways that we can bring people together, we really believe that outside of just the conversation, we forget that people are talking about amazing things, like the ideas that come out of that. And it's funny that we can talk about this project and forget about that aspect of it, which is potentially like just as powerful, just as meaningful. So yeah, people can head over and say hello. And yeah, exploring these ideas is an obsession at the moment, but yeah, I'm loving every minute of it. So
people, like, just to bring it back a little bit to healthy aging as well, is that, you know, just like I said, the loneliness aspect of aging is one of the things that really does us in. You know, as we get older, loneliness does take hold more and more and more, because we find, you know, the people that we know are no longer there. They might, you know, as we get older, a lot of times naturally, if people don't look after themselves, you know, disease takes over and age takes over and things happen. So constantly being connected with people and being reinforced, you know, having people of like mind and thought is just such an important thing, whether it is, you know, a cultural community or a, you know, community of how you know, vegans coming together or people of the same religion coming together, whatever it is. And this is kind of it's almost like another community that people can tap into. Do you feel like that's sort of what you're creating here? You know, it's more than just a conversation with a purpose, or, you know, a topic. It's something like, okay, we're driving conversation. We have a plan. It's more, I would say it goes beyond that. It's like a cultural phenomena. Okay, now we're bringing people together over the fact that they want to come together and have a conversation, which does encourage a unique group of people. You know, it's not everybody's going to be interested in having a conversation. Some people just, you know, that's not how they work. So do you find that it just brings a certain group of people that are interested in that kind of intellectual, you know, let's have a conversation?
Yeah, it's been a community. I mean, we're very early days, but the literal conversations we've had with roughly 150 people, all of them are rock stars who I just want to be around all the time.
Exactly. It's this.
Yeah, it's self-selecting. You're so right.
Yeah.
And that's mushroomed, and all of them want to talk to everybody else. And these are busy people. These are, you know, academics. These are members of parliament, CEOs of major companies, Grammy-nominated artists, etc.
And hopefully normal people like me.
Well, it's everybody.
Yeah.
But the commonality is anyone who's interested in conversation is already just saying, I'm up for it. And they're normally an interesting person, period. And so, yeah, our community, we just had to start somewhere, but it was about just bringing people together who we thought had something to say. To your point, you know, there's anybody can be part of it. We're not being selective, but I'm saying that even when we asked people like that who are super busy, they all said, yeah, count me in. I'll take an hour of my precious time so that I can chat with other people who are interested in having a better conversation. So I love the way you phrased our own company and our own movement. It is a community, and it's a community that's growing carefully and open to everyone, but it's selective because it's self-selecting. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'll say, just get to loneliness. Well, you know, that's a big thing to tackle. I do find anecdotally that the people who are over a certain age and tragically losing people they know are the greatest listeners I know. The ones who are still finding other circles of friends. So I think that that skill of listening, whether you're 9 or 90, is something that literally helps tackle loneliness, because it's hard to find a good listener, right? And if you find someone who is of any age, but a certain age, who might have lost some of their family members and friends, if they're able to listen, they're a fascinating person because they're listening to you talk. And that's a joy to be able to talk to someone who's really there soaking it in. So I would say that one thing, and I don't have research to back this up, but just feel it in my heart and my gut. One thing that helps alleviate loneliness is being a good listener, because people will flock to you.
Completely. And not even just the people will flock to you bit, but also just it's just the high you get from really hearing another person's experience. I mean, there is that unbelievable, feeling. It's like when you meet a group of people that's like you and you're like, wow, I'm not alone. And wow, I just had the most amazing conversation. There is this, lifting feeling that you get that's almost orgasmic. I mean, what can how else can I put it? It's like having the best bar of chocolate, it's like, or whatever it is that drives you. It just feels amazing.
Yeah. And if you go into every conversation thinking, how can I, even in a teeny tiny way, enrich the life of the person I'm talking to, as a simple thing, if you go in with that objective, that will probably create some of those things that we've been talking about in that conversation.
Also,
and that bar of chocolate. Sorry, Harry.
Yeah, no, okay. But to Rafe's point about everyone that we've invited, this idea of like knowledge comes from every angle, and that sort of expertise, the idea of expertise is changing. Like the valuable knowledge is everywhere, and the people that want to kind of tackle this subject of connecting and empathy and compassion and discussion and methodology, all these things, I think on the face of it, you think only is attractive to certain people. But the reason that we're kind of doing this is what we found is there's all kinds of different sort of expertise and people with different life experiences, because life experiences is as valuable now as sort of like traditional expertise. So we're collecting all of these like sort of forms of excellence, not to kind of keep it in a box. It's this idea of everyone's discussing these subjects and we want to share those ideas to help everyone. So the idea of having this community and curating and discussing, we're really thinking about how those ideas can kind of translate through the tools that we make, which can be used by anyone. And the really important thing is that spark of like, well, I'm not a speaker, I'm not a moderator, I don't do that is so common. And what we've seen is even with the first beta prototype that we've made, it's already making someone that would never be a moderator run their own sessions and be able to kind of structure and plan a conversation with friends, with colleagues, even with people that they don't agree with, which is another really interesting thing. So what we're finding is there is this incredible kind of collection of people that we found, but we're feeding those ideas and building something that can sort of be used and everyone can benefit from. So that was an interesting point. But also communication is a lot like food, right? You can think about what you're eating, and a lot of people are consuming communication junk food every day. So we want to help increase that nourishment and reveal that actually you're going to McDonald's every day, man. So think about actually eating some fruit and vegetables. We want to.
Keep my language now.
Well, yeah, good.
Don't
lots of fruit and vegetables
every day. Don't even say that on my video.
Well, lots of fruit and vegetables also helps you live longer. So we hear. So there you go. Now it's the verbal version.
Thank you so much. I'm conscious of the fact that you guys have to go. But thank you so much for your time. It's just been like so enlightening and enriching. And I love it. And I completely want to get involved. And I'm serious, not just saying that for this video. And so this and that chat, that's where people go if they want to be part of the conversation.
Yes, please.
And please do keep us informed when your app comes out, because it sounds like such a great idea. It's almost like a conversation-based meetup. So one last thing is this, let's say people are lonely and are feeling like they want to network, and they are people who are usually interested in conversation, but maybe now because of, this situation that we're in, which has made loneliness much worse, have been losing people. So is this a great place for them to go to really find this new group that they can connect with?
Yeah, I think that something that's really important, like you mentioned about a network, and one of my collaborators is Professor Sophie Scott, who's a director of the neurology department at UCL, and both of our specialisms are voice, right? And I always thought I was focusing and working in voice, but I realized voices don't mean much without dialogue. And when you think about networks, what's the fabric that connects everyone? Like, what is a network? It's talking. Like that is the basis of it. And especially for older generations, it's what you say, it's how you speak. So to think about speaking more, connecting more, she has some really interesting ideas. Talking more offsets things like dementia, which is really interesting. And kind of
thank you.
Yeah, keeping this idea of being lucid, being present. So if we make tools that facilitate, the idea is every single person who has that spark of becoming interested in having a conversation, we can help them do that. We don't always say what that is, how that is. We just help you do it with the tools that we make. So especially, I have my dad is 83, and he can talk for England anyway. He's not a great listener. And I've done some practice sessions with him, and we've done sessions, and he's interested in using that for his friends. So we want to facilitate and help anyone that has a need or an intention of connecting. So loneliness, there is an epidemic of that right now. We absolutely think that these tools can help with that. And we're interested in anyone that can kind of like give us light and think about what they want in their dialogues and how they can improve that.
Amazing. So if they want to get involved, this and that chat. I'll just reaffirm it again, and that will get them into a conversation. And eventually, when you start meeting in person, in parks initially, you can meet people like that. It's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. It's been great chatting.
Amazing. I'm going to pause it.